So my name is Brett. I am the singer and guitarist for the band Regionals. And we've been around for about 6 or 7 years now, operating mostly out of Sydney, but touring around a bit. And this Friday, we're releasing our debut LP, which is called Spoonbender. So we've been working on that one for about 4 years. We recorded it last year with Lachlan Mitchell at Parliament Studios. So we're very, very excited to finally see it out there after 4 years.
Beautiful, Brett. Thanks for joining us, bro.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure, mate.
So, as you mentioned, Regionals released your debut album, Spoonbender, this Friday, August 23rd, mate. Like, how you feeling about it? It's a pretty big deal, like, getting that first one out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, I definitely think there's nerves around, it being a debut album and the fact that, how much work we've put into it, over the course of the last 4 years until now, from a writing perspective, from a recording perspective, like, everything that's sort of gone on over the last 4 years has been anticipatory until we got to this point. So I think, we're all very excited to have it out there, but also very, very nervous at the same time, being that it is the first album.
Yeah, so dive into it a bit more from a musical point of view for us, bro, and tell us what you were going for.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one was a different one for us because we discussed at the beginning having a very specific shift in sound. We wanted to sort of lean into the things that we were being influenced more by. So we kind of wanted to go down a darker direction, a more wall of sound, a more shoegaze style direction in terms of the songs that we were writing. Previously, we'd sort of sat a little bit more on the poppier side. We'd had very intricate song like process in terms of format and things like that. So it was about how do we simplify it, make it a bit darker, make it a bit heavier. So that was why we lent into Lachlan to do the record with us, and we spent a ton of time just making sure that we had the sounds that we were looking for and sort of understanding lyrically what we wanted to talk about on the record. Like, that's definitely in a much darker place than it's been on previous records. So I think for us, in terms of the final product of the record, we feel like we really achieved that sonically. Like, we kind of landed what we wanted to on the record, which I don't think you always do when you walk away from it from a record like that. I feel like sometimes you go, okay, well, there were elements of this where we thought this landed really well, but there are elements over here that maybe didn't work and things like that. I felt like this really sort of hit the mark for us in terms of what we wanted out of that album.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that new direction, bro. Like, it is a bit of a shift from what you usually do. So how did you go in finding the balance between the direction you wanted to go in and what sort of comes more naturally for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of that sits with Aaron, who plays guitar in our band and does majority of the music writing. So he will bring essentially a fully formed demo to the band, and we will then sort of add our own elements to it, and then I add lyrics, melody, etc., and we sort of go from there. But I think he and I have a lot of conversations about the way that we wanted to shift that sound. And I think there's a song on the record, the second song on the record, which is the title track called Spoonbender, which I think is one of the first songs that we did for the record, but is a really nice bridge between the band that we used to be and sort of what the sounds like now. And I feel like for Aaron specifically, and I know this from discussions with him, that once he had that out of the way, it was kind of the bridge that he needed to step over into this side. So I think it was us also being quite critical on the songs as well, and being like, I think this could be heavier. I think this part needs to, breathe a little bit more, those kinds of things. But then in the studio, we sort of also looked at vocally how we were delivering that and how that needed to be a bit darker. And that's where the harsher vocals and the screaming side of things came in, which is something that we haven't really done on records before.
Now, you've released the singles 291, Rotator, and Happiness for Bastards. So are they a good sonic representation of what to expect, or are they just scratch the surface?
I think it's probably a little column A, a little column B. Like, that's definitely the direction that the record goes in, but there are lighter elements on the record than those three songs. There are heavier elements on the record than those three songs. So what I would say is that, overall, that is like 291 for us is kind of like the mark. Like, it's kind of like, this is how the band sounds. This is what we represent. But at the same time, within the album, there are elements of electronic music. There are elements of heavier music where things start to sort of ramp up a bit. So I think it's definitely the consistency of that sound, but I think there's sort of ebbs and flows throughout the record.
Now, you've been quoted as saying that this is a band's truest form when talking about the album. Can you elaborate on that? Like, how so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of very much speaks to my point earlier around us sort of nailing that sound and being like, okay, this is what we're aiming for. This is what, like in discussion, this is what we want, and then in execution, that was actually what we landed. But also at the same time, lyrically, like I think understanding that it is a much darker record, there were sort of things that I wanted to talk about on this record that I hadn't talked about on previous records that maybe we'd been self-conscious around, or musically there are things that we maybe didn't want to try because we weren't sure. We were a lot more open to experimentation in this record, and I think that has kind of landed us in a space where we're like, this is the band that we want to be, and this is the band that we're going to evolve the sound on moving forward. Because I think off the back of having Teenage Seance come out in 2020, there's been so much that's going on, not only in our individual lives, but in the world at the same time, that it very much shifted that narrative for us. So I think moving forward, it's going to be an evolution of the sound of Spoonbender and what that looks like moving forward for us.
Now I want to talk about the cover, bro, because I love it. It's fantastic. It's just got E.T.'s hands in a translucent egg. Like, what the fuck is going on with that?
So I think for us, we've used the same artist for all of our releases, an artist by the name of Dead Galaxy. And he is a friend of the band's, but also someone that we just really admire from an artistic standpoint. And, when we did our first record, we actually briefed him, gave him the record and said, let's you put together something that you think when you hear this record. With Teenage Seance and Spoonbender, we actually looked at artworks that he'd done and chose what we thought suited the record best. So in terms of the artwork, the way that we sort of look at it is self-reflection. It is someone self-reflecting on themselves and seeing something that either might not be there or might be there, but it's kind of someone looking at their own hands in that sense and sort of seeing varying levels of dysphoria. It's around what you see in yourself that might not be there, or what you see in yourself that others might not see, or things like that. It's kind of what's going on underneath and sort of represented as a metaphor within the artwork, but also the fact that we just really fucking love everything he does. And honestly, I think it's such a strong piece of art that we really desperately wanted it for the record. There was a few pieces that we threw around, but I think when Aaron and I saw that particular one and we coupled it with the name of the record, it was kind of like, yeah, we're done. Like that's exactly how we wanted to feel, and we wanted it to feel darker, and it does.
Oh. Now, you released your first two EPs, Sentimental Health and Teenage Seance, in quick succession when you started. Then you took another 4 years to get Spoonbender out, mate. So what sorts of things did you learn about yourselves as a band and about your music in that period?
That if you don't give us a deadline, we will take forever to make a record. And I think there's a few elements to that, right? Like I think, Aaron, like we all sort of move at different speeds when it comes to writing. And I think that they're the kinds of things that kind of ebb and flow a writing process for our band. Aaron is sort of very quick to start to compile demos. Like once he's on a run in terms of the idea that he has, once he has that vision, he's kind of off and racing, and he will fire demos at you like multiple times a week and be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? Then for me, when it comes over to the vocals and the lyrical side of things, like it really is a really broad range of time frames. Like for example, there's a song on the record called Sour Ground, which opens the record. And for me, that had been sitting around for quite a while as an instrumental, and we thought it was going to stay as an instrumental and potentially be on the record just in its own form. And then one day I had a melody idea for it. And then when I sat down to do the lyrics, it was literally done in 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And it just flew out. And then there are other songs where, like songs like Rotator, for example, which was done, like the vocals for that were written in the studio. Like I didn't have anything for that up until that point, and I was kind of really freaking out about it. Like, there's a gaping hole here in terms of the writing, in terms of there's a whole song. But as soon as I sat down to record it, it kind of flowed, and we kind of recorded it line by line in real time. So, not only does the writing process kind of take us a while, but also at the same time, we all have full-time jobs. Like everyone's got a life. Like Aaron's got a little girl. Like everybody has stuff that's going on, and that can kind of impact the way that we're able to sort of connect. But what I would say on this record that we did that we haven't done on previous records is so much pre-production. Like there was so many demos sent around for this record. We were passing stuff back and forward. And I think for our band, that's a really efficient way for us to work, because it can take us a while to sort of get everybody in the room and continuously work through songs and all of those kinds of things, shooting things back and forth and being like, what do you think of this demo? What do you think of this idea? And then having Tim and myself have our own studios as well, where if Aaron sends us something, we can add stuff to it really quickly and send it back. So we kind of had spent nights where we were like firing songs back and forth to each other and adding parts in and all those kinds of things. So there was a really long process in that, but then the vocals probably took quite a while as well, just in terms of writing all of the parts, because I find that, Aaron will give me a baseline of demos, like here's like, 10 songs, and then I'll gravitate to what works for me vocally first, and then I tend to sort of procrastinate on the songs that I'm challenged by in the back end, which kind of ends up in songs like Rotator being done in the studio. It was very similar on the last EP, where the last song, Teenage Seance, I had nothing written for that, and I went into the studio to write it. So sometimes I leave those things to chance, and sometimes I leave those things to chance and nothing still comes, and that song gets hooked because it just did. Yeah, it hasn't panned out the way we wanted it to.
Yeah, God. Now we've spoken about your slight change in direction sonically, I guess. So the big question, I guess, is like, will fans of the band from the Sentimental Health and Teenage Seance days still appreciate the new music?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that remains to be seen, I guess. And I mean, I think for us, like, it's a pretty selfish endeavor in that, we don't want to continuously do the same thing, and our music tastes change, and everybody has such broad taste in the band that we kind of want to bring in different elements. What I would say is there's still definitely elements of that band within Spoonbender. It's just done in a more experimental and heavier way than we've done it before. So like I said, songs like the title track, like it will appeal to people who did like the band before. But there are things on the record that we've tried that they would never have heard us do before, and then probably be like, holy shit, like, yeah, okay, this is different. We would like to hope that everyone goes on that journey with us. But at the same time, I feel like songwriting in general has to be a selfish endeavor, in the sense that, you have to write music that you want to hear. You have to write music that works for you and that the band gets excited about. Otherwise, there's not a huge point in doing it at all. So look, I'm of the hope that the people who have previously liked our band continue on this journey with us. But at the same time, if they don't, we get that. Maybe we'll catch them on the next record. Like, you know what I mean? But for us, it's about how do we continuously drive our musical inspiration and our musical passion and what we want to do. And I think that so much of this album cycle and the lead up to releasing this was us discovering what we wanted that to be. Like, it was a big lesson in discovery, whether that was, experimenting with sound, experimenting with our influences, experimenting with, mixing in the studio and all of those kinds of things. So I think, at the end of the day, everybody in the band is really happy with the record. And I think before you release something, that's probably as good as you're going to get.
Damn straight, brother. Now, you got a launch party coming up at the Chippo in Sydney on September the 6th. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to that. So we have Sunrun, who are a fantastic band from Sydney. We also have Future Heaven, who are another fantastic shoegaze band, young band from Sydney. And then we have our friends Low from Melbourne coming as well, and we've played plenty of shows with them, and they're really good friends of ours, and a phenomenal band at the same time. They released an album earlier this year as well that's just fantastic, incredible songwriters. So we're really looking forward to that. And I think for us, it's also, understanding how these songs translate in a live setting, because there is a lot more experimentation on the record. There's a lot more vocal harmony. There's a lot more keys and drum machines and all of those kinds of things. So it's been a really fun sort of process to figure out how do we integrate those to the live set. But we're really looking forward to giving it a run. And I think, it's always exciting to be able to play new songs to people that you haven't played before. And we were sort of rehearsing and running through a few last night, and it was kind of like, okay, this makes sense. Like, we've got this down, like we can do this, like, especially with all of the additional instrumentation that we put on the record. You kind of do that in the studio, very excited about it. And then when it comes to the live setting, you go, oh, shit, how do we do this?
How do we do that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, but at the same time, there's like excitement in that. Like, there's fun in figuring out how do you recreate those things in a live setting.
Cool. And where can people find out more info about that show or get tickets?
Yeah, so OzTix, but also if you jump on our Instagram, which is @regionals band, and you jump into the link that we've got there, you can grab tickets for that, which will be yeah, we're really looking forward to that show.
Beautiful, Brad. All right, Brad, thanks for your time today, mate. Your debut album Spoonbender is out this Friday, August 23rd. Sounds like there's a bit of territory to cover there, mate. So hopefully people appreciate it.
Hopefully they go on the journey with us, mate. But thank you very much for your time and for speaking to me. I massively appreciate it.